Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be back in Washington. I lived here for a long time, but it's been a long time since I lived here. And it's changed but not changed. I haven't lived here over the last 8 years when I think it changed ways I wasn't always crazy about. In fact, as I was driving over here, I was reading my BlackBerry, which is what we all do all the time anyway. And I see that there's a new report coming out written by some of my colleagues at Newsweek about the Obama administration looking for a new name for the global war on terror. They've decided it's time to get rid of the GWAT and to find some other thing to call whatever it is we're doing against terrorism in the United States and in the world. But they haven't figured out what that is yet. One of the reasons that I, as Paris bureau chief and Middle East editor, decided to write about the NYPD was that I wanted to look at what the alternatives were to the global war on terror, to the approach, an essentially military approach that says the best way to fight terrorism is to fight wars and to go to foreign countries and invade them and occupy them and spend $2.5 billion a week and stay there year after year after year in order to end terrorism. It seemed to me that was maybe not the best approach to the threat that actually existed. So I looked at the NYPD because, among other things, I had met Ray Kelly, the commissioner of the New York Police Department, some years before, and I was impressed by the level of pragmatism that I saw at the NYPD. The idea that they have, although they have a lot of resources for a police department, they've got roughly 35,000 policemen, they've got another 17,000 civilians, they've got a budget of almost $4 billion a year, which is one hell of a police department. Compared to the federal government, the resources are limited, and they have to find ways to do a lot with what they've got if they're going to fight against terrorism and keep New York City safe. But I didn't really know what I was getting into. The general parameters I understood, but it wasn't until early 2007 when I started working on this book that I really sort of had that epiphany about what it is I was looking at. And that's the prologue to the book, and I'm not going to read you the whole prologue, but I'm going to read you part of the prologue that I think will at least just give you a sense of the way the book is written and the essential problem that I found myself trying to address as I reported this book. The winter air is cold and the light hard-edged as the unmarked New York City Police Department helicopter meanders through the winds above the 5 boroughs. The morning is clear in a way, in that way, that is always a little heartbreaking if you were here on September 11th, 2001. There were police choppers in the New York sky then too, but not like this one, which can see so much from so far. It is a state-of-the-art, crime-fighting, terror-busting, order-keeping techno toy with its enormous lens that can magnify any scene on the street almost 1,000 times, then double that digitally, that can watch a crime in progress from miles away, can look in windows, can sense the body heat of people on rooftops or running along sidewalks, can track beepers slipped under cars, can do so very many things that the man in the helmet watching the screens and moving the images with a joystick in his lap, NYPD Detective David Shao, is often a little bit at a loss for words. It really is an amazing tool, he keeps saying. On the left-hand screen is a map of Manhattan. He punches in an address on the Upper East Side, my address of the apartment I keep in Manhattan. The camera on the belly of the machine swivels instantaneously, focuses, and there on the second screen is my building, seen from more than a mile away now, but also up close and personal from this surprising astral angle. The cameras and sensors are locked onto it, staying with it as the chopper turns and homes in. I am glad that I am up here looking and not down there looked at unknowingly. There is always an uneasy tension between the right to security and the right to privacy, and this morning I can feel it, can see it in bold relief as we fly only a few hundred feet above the city's highways and avenues, parks and alleys, museums, monuments, skyscrapers, train stations, hotels, stores, stadiums, stock markets, churches, synagogues, mosques, schools, and homes. All those homes. A city is not an abstraction like homeland. It is home, full stop, to millions of people.
And if you live here and are part of it, what would you be willing to do to defend it? What wouldn't you be willing to do? New York City is the most target-rich environment for terrorists imaginable, a dense metropolis waiting to be ground zero. Yet from this height, it seems so peaceful. And this morning in January 2007, it is, and for the rest of this year, it will be. How is that possible? What does it take to make a city safe in the 21st century? And what in particular does it take to secure this city, which was for so many generations a maelstrom of crime and always an inviting target for mass destruction? In the 3 decades I've been reporting on guerrilla wars and terrorist conspiracies, the fanatical hatred of countless groups has focused on New York City like a compass needle quivering toward magnetic north. Puerto Ricans and Palestinians, the Japanese Red Army, crazed Islamists and radical Jews, all have schemed to bring terror to the city's streets, and the shock of September 11th did not stop the threat for a second. There's a plot taking shape on New York City every day of every week since 9/11, NYPD Intelligence Chief David Cohen told me when I started the reporting that led to this book. What that plot consists of, who's doing it, and where it's percolating from can change, but there's someone out there every day of the week thinking about that. What's required to meet the threat is an incredibly sensitive equilibrium among disparate and contradictory forces: coercion and finesse, political expedience and public interest, basic cop on the beat police work and sophisticated intelligence gathering, respect for the law but a willingness to bend rules, ostentatious spectacle and secret surveillance, lots of police on the street, but maybe a few outside the country, cooperation with federal agencies but also competition. And then there's the matter of personalities, like Cohen's or that of his boss, Commissioner Raymond Kelly. As I came back to New York from years in the Middle East and Europe, what fascinated me about the NYPD was that it offered an alternative to the dangerously ill-conceived, mismanaged, and highly militarized global war on terror that had taken the United States into the gruesome occupation of Iraq and helped inspire a violent loathing for Americans around the world. The most pragmatic responses to terrorism are effective diplomacy and espionage abroad, including covert action, reliable real-time intelligence on every front, and a strong police presence with solid public and indeed neighborhood support. At least that's what I began to believe. A lot of the job is about real-time information, some of which is held by a federal government reluctant to share it. That's why Kelly pushed up the number of NYPD detectives working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation at the Joint Terrorism Task Force from 17 to 130. There were only there are about 130 now, got ahead of myself. That's why Cohen created a seat-of-the-pants intelligence organization in a hidden loft and pushed to station his men in more than 10 countries overseas. That's also why Cohen maintained a direct channel to his old employer, the Central Intelligence Agency, so he could be read into anything that might touch on New York City, including whatever information captured members of Al-Qaeda spilled as they gagged and choked on the CIA interrogators' waterboards at black sites on the far side of the world. Would all this preparation and awareness and intelligence have stopped the attack on New York that clear-skied Tuesday in September? Probably not. But then that was the last war. NYPD under Kelly and Cohen focused on stopping the next attack, and so far the strategy has worked. So people get used to peace in the streets of the city, there beneath the long lenses of the police helicopters. But always the questions come back. What would you do to make your home safe? What wouldn't you do? So, I read that the other night at a gathering with Ray Kelly sitting beside me. And I turned to him and I said, "So, Commissioner, what wouldn't you do?" And his immediate response was, we wouldn't do anything unconstitutional. And I said, yeah, okay. And he says, you know, maybe one thing you missed in the book is how many lawyers we have at the NYPD. We have a lot of lawyers at the NYPD, and anytime we're doing anything, we check this, we think about it. We're not going to infringe the Constitution. And I guess he'd read the book. He said, and those people who say, like the guy in the book, that you don't care about the Constitution at the NYPD, they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong.